Perfected cast. Now, Inside the NBA is not a new show, and the cast that they have now is not the original cast. And it may also sound like a stretch, but I'm not lying to you. Inside the NBA has the perfect cast. Every member has a huge name, even their host Ernie. Shaq, Kenny, and Charles Barkley seem like such a natural fit. In most cases, when people have big personalities like these guys, the show will flame out within a year or two due to fighting and wanting to be the main guy. The difference with this cast is that even though these guys do have big personalities, they also have the ability to check their egos. Maybe not completely, but for the most part. They make fun of themselves on a regular, and when the other guys make fun of them, they can laugh at that too. I'm not saying they don't have fights from time to time, because they do, just as any other group of friends or co-workers do, but those moments are few and far in between. This is due to the fact that whoever picked this cast even knew how the differences in these guys would also be just as beneficial as the ways they are alike. Let's go through some of these differences. Shaq is like the class clown of the group, the one that's the most silly, even though he has an extreme amount of knowledge of the game of basketball. Kenny is the most serious one out of the three, Shaq, Barkley, and himself. Barkley is the one who's the most blunt with his takes, and doesn't really care about the politics of the game of basketball on or off the court. He isn't there to make friends or keep them. Ernie is like the father figure of these guys. They respect him and understand that he steers the show. Even though he always lets them do their thing without interference, he will check them if need to if the show gets off the rails. Out of the three former players, Shaq has won the most rings during his time in the NBA. He's also played with Kobe, he's played with Penny, he's played with Dwayne Wade, and he's played with LeBron. He played with a lot of legendary players, and aside from LeBron, he wasn't there just to ride their coattails. He was a key contributor. With Penny and Kobe, he was the number one option. With Wade, he was number two because he chose to be number two. He was nearing the end of his career. What else was he supposed to do? And with LeBron, he was past his prime, so of course LeBron played the one. LeBron is also considered the GOAT by many, so there's no telling who would have played the number one guy even if Shaq was in his prime. Now, even though Shaq has won the most rings, that doesn't mean the rest of them are ringless. Kenny has actually won 2 rings, but he wasn't the number one guy on the team. He played with Hakeem Olajuwon, who's considered one of the best centers to ever play the game. Now, Charles Barkley didn't win a ring, but he did lead the Suns team to the finals and played against the GOAT Michael Jeffrey Jordan. He lost, but he's the only one of the cast that has played Jordan in the finals. He was also the most controversial one of the crew during his playing days. Still is today if we're being honest. All in all, Ernie, Kenny, Charles, and Shaq fit perfectly together, and it's evident when you see them on the screen. No interference. When the show takes off because of the cast, the egos of the people up top start to inflate. They feel like they can and should make changes all of the time to improve the show. Yes, I use quotation marks on improve the show just in case you were wondering. It fails 100% of the time, and I do mean 100% of the time. Now, of course, there are always ways to fine-tune a product, but when you have a product as good as Inside the NBA, that's all you should be willing to do. You already got the most important decision right, which was the cast in this case, so major changes aren't needed. Let the main attraction to your product, again, in this case, would be the cast, lead your product. All you need to do is find out why people love your product's main feature, and fine-tune the things around it. The cast is why people tune in to Inside the NBA. And the reason why we love the cast is because they are all being themselves. In their natural state, they are entertaining. In this case, all you need to do is let them have freedom to do as they please. But again, this wouldn't work for just anyone. Imagine Antonio Brown being given a network platform and freedom. The whole network would be fined so much that it would go bankrupt and have to shut down. But these 4 guys are entertaining and know how to skirt the line professionally without changing the core of themselves. Whoever's running the show up top has noticed this and allowed the show to be the show without any interference. Another important piece of this show and the way it entertains us is the fact that we see the cast argue on those rare occasions that I mentioned earlier, and sometimes it seems like it may tip over. But like I said, they know how to skirt the line professionally, so they turn it back, and if not, Kenny or Ernie steps in and shuts the shit down, because mostly Shaq and Barkley are the ones that may or may not go over the line. Most shows and their cast won't be able to handle that. They usually crash and burn, or someone gets fired, and the whole dynamic of the show changes in a way that viewers usually don't like. The showrunners on other shows usually try to completely prevent this, but the showrunners on Inside the NBA are a little different. They allow these rare arguments to happen because they trust the cast to pull it back together while still entertaining the audience. This adds to the authenticity of the show because a lot of sports debates end up in full-blown arguments in the real world, so when we see it on TV, we feel like we can relate to it. Again, the showrunners are making a smart decision not to have too much interference and change the show and its core elements. Iconic segments. Inside the NBA has some iconic segments. Shaq's Shaq and the Fool, Ernie's EJ's Neato stat, Kenny running to the board to break down plays from the game. Usually someone races Kenny to the board, and sometimes people cheat or just trip. Either way, it's funny and entertaining.
Get him, Kenny. Oh! You set me up, Ernie. Hey, what do you mean, me? You set me up, Ernie.
Plus, he knows what he's talking about. My favorite segment from Sir Charles is Who We Play For, and that's where he guesses which team a random player plays for. Gone Fishing is another favorite, where they show random photos altered with players from the team that failed to make the playoffs or have been bounced out of the playoff, and usually someone from the cast, while they're on a boat.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
I don't know if I explained that right, but here go a few pictures. Now these are just a few of my favorite segments. These segments also usually get social media involved, and the show turns into a social media post in real time on the actual screen. Fans usually love this because they become a part of the joke. Other watchers are watching someone sitting at home like them become part of the joke. It creates a want to participate, or at least be part of the conversation on social media. Shaq and the Fool might be the most viral of all these segments. Shaq shows and does commentary of all the blooper plays that players make, and no one, not even superstars, are exempt. Chances are, if you watch this show, or this will be your first season, you will find a segment that you love. These are just 3 things that make Inside the NBA the greatest sports show on the planet. Y'all be great. I'm out.